And there are significant cost savings, not only for the designers and engineers, but we see throughout the organization. So increasing engineering capacity is another key aspect. We find today that there's a shortage of qualified and trained engineers in industry, and anything we could do to extend their utility to the organization and help them get more manpower and man-hours out of their day is very valuable. So the information discovery challenges around duplicate parts are, we hear constantly that part reuse is a key priority for a lot of our customers, but reusing parts and subsystems is very difficult. So what we hear a complaint often, if you didn't create the original files, is very difficult to find, and a lot of our engineering contacts tell us they feel like Ask.com as their associates come to them, not only from their own department but from other departments. Hey, can you help me find the file for these parts, or isn't that just like the other one? So we find that as an impediment in the workday. And then the other part is it's always easier and faster to create reuse a part than it is to create a new design or to find a similar one and reuse that. So in our cost studies, we find that eliminating even 5% of duplicates can be a significant savings for an organization. So we'll talk a little bit more about return on investment for you there. But at this time, we have just a couple of quick poll questions. We want to keep this interactive. We're very interested in you, our audience, and feedback, and tell us a little bit more about your experiences and answers to our questions. So Joni, if you would, set that up, and if you would just go ahead and toggle your screen to a yes or no answer for this question, and we'll have one more after this. And I'll give just a short pause while we wait for some results on this question. Excellent. So we have some results already. Thanks for participating on that. Very quickly, the answer yes to that question was 57% of our audience, and 53% of our audience answered no to that. So we have a second question to follow up, if you would. You believe there's a duplicate part creation issue in your company? We'll pause for just another minute. Wow, they're definitely skewed to the top-heavy results. So we have the right audience. Do you believe there is a duplicate part issue? And over 80% of the audience said yes. So thanks for participating. Let's carry on just a little bit. So how is OnePart different? Not only does Exalead OnePart help engineers and designers find duplicate parts in their repositories information, it also presents the information in such a way to help you begin to decide, is it going to be easier to reuse or recreate or start from new? So let's take a look at typically how an engineer might apply the OnePart experience. So the designer will go to the OnePart web interface, and he'll start up a search, and you may want to do a text search of drawings. We, of course, will talk a little bit more about some other repositories of information which we can query. Then what will be returned, or we can look for a 3D signature of it and part similarity. And what information is returned is information about the parents and children, modification dates, mechanical features, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. You can even drill down through the mechanical features. We'll help you find the related documentation, because we know that's essential in creating and designing parts. So if we can reuse related documents, that's going to significantly improve the throughput in your engineering and design process. And then finally, if it's of value to you and your company, we can map metadata from your ERP system to expand that search capability. So at this point, we're going to take a quick break from my overview and move right into the demonstration with Rob Doneff of Dassault Systems, and he will take over from here. Rob, just bear with me a second as I turn this over to you. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Rich. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay.
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Great. Let me just hide my control panel so I can see my full screen. Does everyone have a pretty good view of my screen here? What I've done is logged into the Exalead OnePart application. Based on my login access rights, I actually have access to files that I normally would through the source systems, so we can actually maintain the security of your existing content files when I do a search. Or we can say we want to give the ability to discover everything, but if I go to click on something, I may not actually have the physical security to get to that actual file to utilize it. In the example that Rich brought up was I kind of need a clamp, so I'm going to look for a clamp. I have to redesign a clamp maybe for the saw handle, and I'm going to look for a clamp that's made out of certain kind of material, so some sort of an alloy, aluminum alloy or a steel alloy. And you can see how quickly I can drill down using very simple search terms to a small subset of clamps and parts within the system. So I went from about 20,000 or 12,000 parts down to about 44. And I'll just grab this very first part, happens to be a CATIA part. So I'm going to work with some CATIA things. And I can see various information about this particular part. I can see attributes about it. We can actually link into other content. So it's not just the part, but it's existing other types of content like the ERP information. So I can see who's the vendor of this part, how much does it cost. You know, is it something that might be in stock? It looks like we don't have any of these in stock right now. I can also see 3D similarity. So I can see that there's lots of other parts. Right here I have 20 different parts that are similar in shape and size. And if I want, I can actually compare these. But what I might do first is that's way too many results. So I want to change this and get it closer to similarity. So I'm going to change it from 87% to say about 95%, the same size, shape, etc. And now I can limit my results down to something a little bit more manageable. So now I'm down to about 7 or 8 parts. So I'm going to select this one as my reference part because it was the first one I picked, and I'll just randomly pick 2 or 3 of these other ones. And now I'll do a side-by-side comparison of these parts. I like to think of this as like I'm on Amazon and I'm shopping for a part. I'm going to move to this view right here where I'm looking at my comparison side by side. And here I can see where these parts are the same or different. These parts happen to be pretty much the exact same part, it looks like. Matter of fact, all of these are 100% the same shape and size and dimensions. They look like they could be the same part, but they appear to be in different folders. So it looks like somebody might have copied this part and moved it into multiple locations. And then from here, if I want, I can actually go and change some of my other parameters, and we can look at some other parts there. So I'll go back to my other view. And,
Hi, Rob, this is Rich, and did want to take a pause here for a second. You and I were talking about some things about the system yesterday, and one of the things we talked about was the fact that many of our customers were not so naive as to think that CATIA is the only 3D system out there in the world, and many companies are using CATIA in conjunction with other systems such as Inventor or SolidWorks. Can you address what if we wanted to expand that search to other repositories of information? What kind of results would you get there?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rich. Actually, I think when I've gone and done my extra selection here, I may have selected some other parts that are of some different types. So let's just take a quick look at that. And then I can also kind of explain where we can even drill down and look for certain types of parts. But you can see here about the 5th one. To be a SolidWorks assembly or SolidWorks part versus the CATIA. I quickly promote that to the beginning point, my reference line, and then all of the other parts will be evaluated against that reference part. And then I can also do things like there may be some tagging information. So this one actually is a duplicate, obsoleted part. This one's the master. So now I can quickly determine that this is the part that I really want. Maybe in this particular case, this one happens to be a step file, but it could be any other type part along that line. Okay, so the ability to use lots of different kinds of data to select the parts you want. I'm going to go ahead and clear my selection right here, and we're going to go back to my main list again, and we'll do a part search for, say, something else, but I'm just going to bring up all the parts again. And you can see that the system is extremely responsive, and actually this demonstration environment is running on a server over in France. But if it's behind your firewall, you can typically get this thing to respond in sub-millisecond response time in some cases. And you can see my results here. I had 12,000 different parts. I can take a look at parts that are done over time, who they were created by, what type of parts. You can see here where I might look for all the SolidWorks parts or all the parts that are in AutoCAD format. Or from here, I could actually select it out of this environment. So you can see here we have PDFs, Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, even zip archives where we're actually indexing every individual file inside the zip so that when I find a search result, it'll actually tell me that it's this file and it happens to be in this zip archive or in that directory. So here I'll do another search for that. We'll do the clamp again. And you'll see how I get type ahead. Or we'll just do a different one. I'm going to type in the word bracket, and I'm actually going to misspell it. But we should be able to use standard search capabilities to determine finding a specific part, even if they didn't name the parameter or name the part in the same way. And you can see here where in this PDF document we found the word bracket here highlighted, whereas here it was actually in the title. And I'll just pick this bracket as an example. Another sort of additional use case where I've got 3D similarity, and I can actually drill up through the parent-child relationship because we know this bracket has a link from this assembly, and that this assembly is also part of this assembly here. So I'm kind of drilling my way up through the assembly as designed. And let me minimize my screen just a little bit, give you a little bit better view here. And you can see here where I've got these different children. There's 10 different children here, and where there's a blue number, it actually tells me that there's 2 of these rods or shafts in this assembly, and that I have 6 of these screws and 1 of these screws. And if I selected these, I could actually see, are these actually 2 different screws, or are they the same screw with just different part numbers? Now we don't have a poll question for this, but I'm fairly certain most of the places where clients where I've discussed this, if you go to get an assembly, a lot of times you're not going to be able to actually get the assembly to render because you don't have all the children. And locating the children is a very lengthy, time-consuming process because you have to basically kind of pick and choose and drill down looking through folders. You may not know exactly where they're located. And as you can see from here, because we're indexing content across lots of different data sources, I could see that where the assembly thought the children actually were would have given me all broken links. But I'm able to do different mapping where I can say, oh, I'm going to look in the folder of the pointing document or where the link is. So it looks like somebody grabbed all of the parts and moved them into the assembly directory or library. But I could even index everywhere, including workstations for the engineers, etc. And as we said, we had the 2 shafts in this part. But you can see here that I've got 5 duplicate copies of that same part located around all of the areas where we've done the indexing. So this is one really good way to determine how much duplication you have, and then how you can clean that up is to take a look at that particular part, get a list of all the different locations, and you can actually share that. So we could take a look at the specific part. I'll just grab this one bracket, and then we can actually create little reports, as it were, sort of on the fly. I'm going to select this one and a couple of these others just to show you how, if these were potentially duplicated parts, I can then put this either in a table view where I could see all the content together and export this out as a CSV file here, or I could potentially share this as a URL, give this to, say, someone in purchasing and say, these are all really the same parts, but we're getting them from different vendors, or the same vendors with different vendor part numbers, and we should probably be able to reduce some costs out of this. So kind of a pretty quick way where you can use the tool to isolate and quickly find the part you want, regardless of what file format it might be in, where the repository might be. You can do information or look up information against things like mechanical features, such as a clamp that has a certain number of holes, or a bracket with certain plane surfaces or number of tabs in the bracket. And that's kind of a very quick sort of overview of how you use the product to isolate, locate the part you need, evaluate that against all the other potential parts that you could use so that you could select the best possible one for the specific use case you have. Okay.
Thank you, Rob. That's pretty good. You know, another thing you and I talked about the other day was you gave us a preview of the analytics available with this, and I see where that may be a value, certainly to the engineer, but certainly to their management team as well. Do you have a couple of minutes to go over that for our audience today?
Oh, sure. We'll go in, and I'll use one example where I'll go in and look in the where section of my system here, and I may have specific projects. So I'll look at, say, this particular project right here. And this is actually going to give me all of the documents that were created for that particular project, and these actually happen to be AutoCAD drawings of our Vélizy campus over in France. And I can go into an analytics view, which gives me some very interesting information here. One, I can see the creation date, so I can see that we kind of started this project planning a long time ago when these files started getting created, but the real ramp-up period was like during this section of time. So I can see how much time was. If I get to either rebuild, or I've got another potential program or project that we want to build or scope out for a client opportunity, I can go back into the system with information that's automatically discovered as we index the content and say, it took us X number of weeks to build this content, right? It took us X number of people to actually do this. What kind of pieces were put together? What sorts of documents? Where were they stored? We could have different kinds of tags about that information as we use it over time. Even things like the quantities, so I can see we did this project, here's all the stuff we still have left over from that project from a part standpoint for potential reuse. And I can even go in and look at like mechanical features, materials. And what's interesting is that these actually become search result options. So if I wanted to look, say, for all of the parts that were made out of steel, that were part of this project that were called out as steel, I click on this and it automatically updates my analytics view. And then at the same token, I can then go and see what are all of the files that actually had that called out as part of that project or that material.
That's great. That's what we needed, a brief overview, Rob. That's excellent for our audience. And did you have anything else you need to show at this time?
Yeah, I think the only other things would be if I wanted to look for something in more detail, because really we're also looking for like mechanical features. So I'm going to go back in and look for this bracket, and just wanted to show that in addition to information that you might normally store inside of a PLM or a PDM environment, we actually also extract lots of mechanical information from the drawing. So we actually take the attributes as they're defined within the drawing and call those out as semantic terms. So I can say I want to look for brackets that have one or more holes. So I'll go from 44 down to 5. Or down here I could actually say I want bracket that might be of a certain file size, right? Or number of shafts or chamfer, or number of threads if it was a screw. Or even, based on a certain price, so I can have a price range of information that I might be looking for. So there's lots of different ways that we represent the information that we automatically extract as we index the content, and it's regardless of where it is or what it is. And then we can also then interrelate that information as well, so that when I'm looking for a bracket, I not only see the bracket and the 3D similarity and the parents, but I can also see things like related documents, and it could be bill of material specifications, it might be simulation file data, engineering change control order documents, or installation instructions on how to actually put this part into the assembly. All of this kind of information is automatically related by the system during the time that it does the indexing for the content. And I think that's a pretty good, quick, there's a lot of features and functions I've showed, so we've done this fairly quickly, but hopefully that gives a pretty good idea of what the actual product can do for you.
Yeah, given the time allowed, Rob, I think that's excellent. Thank you very much for giving us that overview. Now, towards the end of this webinar, and we've probably got about 10, maybe 15 minutes to go here, we'll allow the audience to ask a few questions right before our last poll question. So I'll pick it up from there, do a little bit of a review, if you don't mind, and as we change presenters here. Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, so you get to see a pretty nice demo from Rob, and thanks again for that demonstration. So we do have a poll question at this time, again, for our audience. So is your company concerned with how much time and cost is involved in with parts duplication? So I'll give you, again, a minute or so to answer the questions and give you the results here. Excellent. We've got a 50-50 on that, and 50% do have problems and 50% aren't sure. So again, thanks for joining us, because it's definitely the right audience, and we'll tell you about how we might be able to help you. So let's go on. We'll do a quick summary of what Rob covered, and basically the Exalead OnePart is going to allow you to get into your digital assets and help you decide if you need to design a new part or if you can reuse. So we go into the system and discover it if it exists, create a short list of the possible items to compare it with. You get the information on the parent-child relationships and related documents, and that then pretty much presents a lot of the information you need to decide if you're going to reuse or have to create new. So very good there. So in terms of savings, we've got to figure out, how do we help you afford this software, and we're always looking for that return on investment for our customers. So we do have the hard savings, such as a reduced stock and reduced potential cost of poor quality and increased engineering capacity, as well as some of your soft costs. And we'll talk about that in an example here shortly. But some of the other significant costs incurred in duplicate parts are in your vendor selection, in quality assurance, performance validation, documentation. All these add up to quite a bit of a cost for an organization to have duplicate parts, and we will make a compelling story to incorporate the Exalead OnePart for your business. So here's a short example about an international machine tool supplier that had over 64,000 existing part numbers, and during any given year they were creating about 5,000 new parts per year. And when they did a study, they found out that about 1% of those 5,000 parts were duplicates. So that means they were duplicating 50 parts per year. Doesn't sound like a lot until you start getting involved with all the costs as they roll that up. A new part number for them, when you take it end to end in their business, cost them about $4,500, which then over 50 parts per year was a $225,000 a year problem for them. Pardon me. So we implemented the OnePart from Exalead, and for 10 engineers, the cost of the software is about $18,000. So we got a real nice savings in that scenario. What we'd like you to do and encourage you to do is get with your reps, and they will be getting with you to do your own return on investment example and summary for your businesses. And we really don't need a lot of information from you in order to accomplish that, but we'll be in touch. One of the things we thought might be interesting is just, and a lot of people want to know, basically how it works. And it's a pretty simple block diagram. And essentially, we're going to use our connectors to take in information from your various repositories. and convert it into the information required for indexing, and simply create an index and set up a search server and a user interface. So the user interface, which is really nice for most of us, is just simply a web browser, and the Exalead OnePart architecture is administered in the same fashion, very similar to which you would administer your web application, web browsers. So content, CAD content, of course, is important to most of our audience. We currently handle all of these different CAD file formats. We also have some of the non-CAD formats that are very popular and very important in the engineering and design world, such as Word, Excel, and PDF. So, as well, we will take information from other content sources, which would be your PDM systems, NPLM systems, and document sources such as SharePoint. And finally, there is a connector. There are connectors available for you to connect through your business services using external services to set up those connectors in your world. The bottom line is it's a fairly straightforward solution. It takes some time for the initial setup, and the time that is required is only to index your repositories of information. The actual setup is relatively straightforward. It's a non-intrusive, no impact on your legacy, and it provides you the same options for security as any other web-based browser access to a system would provide. So very, very straightforward, probably one of the highest return on investment applications I've seen in a number of years in this industry. So again, what we're looking for is the features and benefits of to avoid the cost associated with duplicate part creation, resulting in savings for you by increasing your engineering capacity. And it's a solution that's very easy to use with little or actually no training. If you can use a web browser, you can use the Exalead OnePart. It's got a very rapid adoption and rapidly deployable with minimal hardware costs. Again, nothing special required in terms of the hardware and implementation. So we do have another poll question coming up here as well. If you do have any questions, now's the time to send them over to me. As if you'll look in your chat, I am the organizer, Rich Tenaglia, and fielding questions at this time while Joni gives us the poll question. So would your company be interested in finding out more about the potential return on investment of parts reuse? And let me comment on that. It again, is a very short and straightforward calculation for you. Great. Excellent. Again, a 50-50. Thank you for participating in that poll question. Seems that half of our audience is, in fact, interested in doing that return on investment calculation. I think that's an excellent place to start. We, in the software world, love our technology and love all the bits and bytes that go with it, but we have to remember it's about the money and what's it going to do for your business. So I'm going to put you just on mute for just a second, audience. We're going to review a couple of questions, and I'll come back to you. Okay. Excellent. This is a topic we have at least one of our users or one of our participants asking about attribute mapping. I'm going to turn that question back over to Rob. Rob, I don't know if we need a presentation on that, but we could probably talk through it real brief. That was something you and I discussed briefly the other day. I think that's an excellent question. Rob, can you help us with that one? And again,
yes,
the question, how is attribute mapping done?
Yes. So out of the box, the product has a set of semantic processing rules so that as we go through, say, a CATIA file, and we see the attribute map of that CATIA file, we determine that certain attributes are called out that would map to a certain semantic name. So, for example, holes or extrusions might be treated as holes, thread cuts or rotation points, tabs or plane surfaces. Where two planes come together, we would treat that as an angle. And what's interesting is that for certain customers, we have one who's based out of Europe where they do a lot of sheet metal bracket work, and they wanted to be able to determine or to search based on the shape of the bracket, so an L shape or a Z shape or an omega shape. And we were able to do a semantic attribute mapping that said if there were two planes with one angle between it, you could actually, we would semantically name that as an L shape. So they could say L bracket of a certain dimension, and it would immediately return back all the brackets that were of that same shape and size. So if there are specific attributes that you want to create or add as search facets or the ability to drill down into that, it's totally supported within the product. And there's a very robust semantic processing rule set that's out of the box that comes with the product that way. Hope that answered the question.
Good. Thank you, Rob. Another question, and I know we had discussed this the other day too and wanted to go very briefly into it, but in order to map information from an ERP system, can you give us a 60-second overview on that aspect of Exalead? Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. So with the ERP data, what we've provided out of the box are approximately 13 ERP metadata fields. Things like supplier name, supplier part number, cost, currency, quantity, things along that line. Now we realize that most of the organizations already run some level of reports out of their ERP systems, and that we take advantage of those reports if they can extract that as a CSV file, which they're probably doing because a lot of people will then take that and drop it into Excel spreadsheets and all kinds of things. We can index the CSV file, and during your initial configuration and setup, you basically map columns within the CSV to the metadata that's pre-configured. If there's additional metadata information that you'd like to maintain, that can be added to the product through services. But for the most part, ERP data is typically based on either using a database export to CSV or through an XML file or a database direct connection, which is also available out of the box. But that does create impact at the ERP system from, how often do you really need that updated information? That determines how frequently, you might want to do that. Most of the time our clients do it as a once a day batch run to export it and then index that information in, or even once a week, depending on how frequently that information needs to be updated.
Very good, Rob. I think that's a nice explanation on that aspect of it, and it does extend the utility of the Exalead OnePart by being able to also use their business system as a repository of information to be searched for duplicate parts. So very good. So this brings us pretty close to the end. I think that covers just about everything we have here. We have covered the last polling question. I did want to go over again the OnePart example for the international machine tool supplier. The reason is I think, again, this is a fairly short investment of time to find out what's the value of Exalead OnePart to you. And we had a significant savings in this real-life customer. We'd like to have our sales team get with you and your team and get some information and prepare this. It really requires just a very little bit of time on your part, and we could present some information, turn that around in a day or two for you just to give you an idea of what the potential savings for your organization is. So at this time, I don't think we have any more additional questions and such. I'm going to turn it over to Joni to close out our webinar for today. Here's our contact information. I'll leave that up on screen. Thanks again to everybody for attending. Look forward to a call from our sales team, and they'll be discussing your particular questions and answers for the Exalead OnePart, as well as helping you look into the value assessment for your organization. Again, this is Rich Tenaglia for Adaptive Corporation on behalf of Dassault Systems Exalead OnePart. Joni, please close us out. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Like Rich said, this concludes today's event. We thank you again for your attendance, and please visit our website for a recording of the webinar in the next day or so. Goodbye for now, and enjoy the rest of your day.